going to solve this one by substitution. To solve it by substitution, I showed you how to divide your paper into 3 columns. But it is not mathematically necessary to divide it into 3 columns. It just helps you keep things organized. And so I put the easiest equation in the first column. The other equation in the second column, and back to the easiest one. And the columns, again, is just to keep things organized. Now, in the first column, I need to either solve for x or y. This is already solved for y. It says y equals, so I don't have to do anything to it. And then I am going to make my substitution. In place of this y, I'm going to put this part right here because it's equal to y. In place of this y, I'm going to put this stuff that's equal to y, and then I'm going to bring this other part down. Now, why did I do this substitution in the first place? In this equation, there's an x and a y. I can solve for x or I can solve for y, but I can't figure out what the number is because you cannot solve one equation with 2 letters, 2 variables. In this equation, how many letters do I have? I have an x over here and I have an x over here, but I just have an x. I did this so that I don't have an x and a y in the same equation. I substituted for y so that I don't have a y anymore. And then I continue solving it. I need to get the x's together. Please remember that's a 1x. I need to add 2x to both sides. What does that do to this part right here? That cancels this out, and over here I have 3x plus 4 equals 13. I'm solving for x. I need x by itself. What am I going to do with the 4? And then I'm going to have 3x equals 9 because these are going to cancel out. Divide both sides by 3. I'm going to write it over here because I'm running out of room. 9 divided by 3. Now I know what x is equal to. Then I go back to this last equation and I plug in the x that I just calculated. Now I just have a y. I don't have an x and a y in the same equation. I just have a y. So I can solve for the y. And the answer is a point. If I graphed these 2 equations, they would make 2 lines, and this is the intersection point for those 2 lines. That's what you're finding when you are solving a system. You are finding the intersection point. Next problem. Let me clear the screen. For this next problem, You can solve it by substitution or elimination. Just to refresh your memory about what elimination is, we're going to solve this one by elimination. To solve it by elimination, I need the columns to be lined up. I need the x over here on this side because this one is in standard form. So I'm going to bring down the first equation. I subtracted 7x from both sides so that I could line up everything. Have my x's lined up, my y's lined up, and my numbers lined up. Now, because this one has a positive and this one has a negative and this has a coefficient of 1, it's going to be easiest to eliminate the y. What number do I need right here to cancel out that number? That's a -4, so this needs to be a +4, because a -4 would cancel out a +4, but it's not a +4. What do I have to multiply 1 by so it will be a +4? And the parentheses means I'm going to multiply all of these by the 4. Bring down the first equation. I still hadn't done anything to it. Multiply this by 4. 4 times -7. 4 times 1. And don't forget the 4 has to multiply by the -6 also. Have to multiply all 3 of these by 4. The reason I multiplied by 4 was so that this would cancel out. Does a +4 and a -4 cancel out? And so then I add up my columns, a +4 and a -28. 0 subtract 24. I am solving for x. Cancel out the 24, cancel out the negatives. X equals -24 divided by a -24. The negatives cancel out. 24 divided by 24 is 1. Now I know what x is equal to. Then I go back to whichever one of my equations looks easiest. And in place of the x, I put a 1. 7 times 1. X is equal to 1, y is equal to 1. That's my intersection point. So, you have any opinion about which one's easier, elimination or substitution? If I had solved this by substitution, would I have gotten a different answer? This is the answer. You're going to get this same answer whether you solve by substitution or elimination. You'll get the same answer. You'll just have different steps to get there. So, some of my students prefer elimination. Some of my students prefer substitution. Some of my students prefer not to do the work. That preference is not allowed. But you may solve by substitution or elimination, whichever one that you think is easiest. Okay. So since these are lined up, the x's are lined up, the y's are lined up, this one is probably easier solved by elimination. And since this is a positive and this is a negative, this probably is the easiest one to eliminate. If I'm going to eliminate, what number do I need right there? If I'm going to eliminate the y, what number do I need right here? This is a positive 4, so this needs to be a negative 4. What am I going to have to multiply by so that this will be a negative 4? So I'm going to multiply this equation by a positive 2, the whole thing. And the parentheses around it means multiply by the whole thing, so I don't need that one on that end. This bracket right here just means it's a system. Bring down the first one because I haven't done anything to it. Rewrite the second one, multiplying by 2. That would be a 2x. That would be a negative 4y. And that would be equal to a negative 16. The reason I multiplied by 2 was so that those numbers right there would cancel out. 2 plus 2 is 4. That cancels out. That would be a negative 8. Positive 8 and a negative 16 gives you a negative 8 answer. Divide both sides by 4 to cancel that out. Equals negative 2. Go back. Negative 2? Yes. Go back to whichever one of your original equations looks easiest. In place of this x, I'm going to substitute in this negative 2 that I found right there. I'm solving for this y, so I'm going to add this 2 to both sides. We cancel that out. What's the last step? This is the intersection point. And our favorite kind of problem, a word problem. So what are the important pieces of information out of this word problem? Well, we have a total of 20. And the coins are $4. Yes, we need this too. Now, there's some information left out of this problem because it is common knowledge. But before I can start writing down my equations, what variables am I going to use? Am I going to use x's and y's? Or am I going to use n and q? Doesn't matter. There. So n will stand for the number of nickels, and q will stand for the number of quarters. Now, what's left out of this problem is, how much is a nickel worth? Because that's common knowledge. A nickel is 5 cents. How much is a quarter worth? And the total money is $4. And the total number of, oops, I left my Q out of that problem. The total number of coins is 20. This doesn't have a particular easier way. What do you want to do? Substitution or elimination? We can do it either way. Nobody has an opinion in this classroom. Okay, if we're going to do substitution, that's where you divide your paper into 3 columns. This is just to keep it organized. The first, the next, back to the first. Now, this is not solved for the N or the Q. And they're both the same difficulty. So again, you have a choice to make. Do you want to solve this for N or for Q? One's not particularly easier than the other, so we'll just subtract the Q from both sides. And N is equal to 20 subtract Q. So in place of this N, I'm going to put 20 subtract, that's a Q. I'm still going to have the 0.05 out in front. I'm still going to have the quarter, and I'm still going to have the $4. But in place of this N, I put this part that was equal to N. And then I have to distribute. So I have to multiply that. So this is going to be 0.05 times 20. What's that? That's 1. And 0.05 Q plus 0.25 Q equals 4. Now I need to combine some like terms. I am going to subtract 1 from both sides to get my numbers together. You got that much? Because I'm running, as you can see, I'm running out of room here. So I'm going to have to make myself a new column. So in this middle column, I had negative 0.05 plus 0.25 Q equals 3. That's what I saw, wasn't it? Did I copy it down right? Is that what you have on your last step? Okay, and so then these two have to be combined like terms. When I add those together, that's what you get. And then You may need a calculator for this division. That's equal to 15 when you divide that out. So then we go back to our easiest equation. Oh, it wasn't. I was not using x's and y's. I was using, and in place of this, I'm going to put a 15. Subtract 15 from both sides. N equals 5. Aiden had 5 nickels and 15 quarters.